I'm Jamie Wallace. I am a lifetime resident of East Palestine, Ohio. I was born and raised there. I have 47 immediate family members within the 1 mile zone of the derailment. On the night of the derailment of February 3rd, uh, I actually got a phone call from my mother that told me that there had been a train derailment in town. I started to hear a lot of different first responder vehicles, which in a small town like ours, the first thing you do is jump up and look out the window because you probably where they're going, or know someone associated with where they're going. So I started to hear all this stuff. I started getting a little concerned, but not too concerned. My husband had actually had a friend down from Cleveland on that night, and his friend's a single father. So I was at home with my daughter and my husband's friend's son, and they had gone out to have drinks, as guys do. So as soon as I heard the derailment was next to Lake's gas station, I called my husband because the local watering hole, the only bar in town really, is right there next to this gas station, and that's where my husband was. So I called him at the bar and I said, I think you need to come home. Like, they said a train just derailed right behind where you are. And he's like, you just, wanted me to come home. I haven't been out drinking with my friend in a year. And I'm sure you guys know the whole little spiel. He thought I just wanted him to come home. So I hang up, and about 5 minutes later, he calls me back and he's like, I'm on my way home. He's like, this gas station's going to blow. So by the time him and his friend got back to the house, my mother called and said they were evacuating everyone within a 1 mile radius of this derailment. So, we just kind of grabbed what we could and threw it in the car and took off. We actually ended up staying in a hotel room with my brother that night. As Chris kind of touched on, it's like when you're told that you have to leave your house, you don't know where to go. We live in a very rural area, so there's not a lot of hotels around us. And, the one hotel in Columbiana, was booked. And, if you didn't stay there, you were traveling. Well, there was one the other direction in PA, but you're traveling 45 minutes to get to a hotel. All the hotels were booked. So my brother said, just come stay with us. It's just for the night. That's what we thought. The next morning we ended up getting our own hotel. I had to go back home. I was going to go back and get our prescription medications that Sunday, because again, you're not thinking of all this stuff that you need to grab when you're running out of your house. And before I left, I was talking to my husband, and he said, what are we going to do when they lift this evacuation? I said, we're going to go home. I said, if the EPA says it's okay, right? That's what I learned in school. I have a master's degree. I have a law degree. But as soon as I pulled in my driveway to pick up those prescriptions, I knew it wasn't okay. My lungs started burning. I couldn't breathe. My lips were tingling, mouth on fire, eyes were on fire. You look over and I see chemicals free flowing down the little creek that runs right in front of my house. Like, I don't need a degree. I don't need to know anything about chemicals, nothing about science. My body was telling me that it was not okay to be there. We actually had a lead toxicologist for the railroad come in our house and say that it was contaminated because there was the creek that ran like 7 steps in front of my front door. And some of that contaminated water was actually leaking into the basement. So we have never been back to live in that house since the night of the derailment. There's so much that I could sit here and tell you. The one thing that I tell people is, if I would have listened to me talk pre-derailment, I would think I was a crazy conspiracy theorist from out west that wants to hold up the government with their shotgun. I probably wouldn't have believed me because that's just not the way my mind worked. I actually feel like I've been living in a movie set my whole life. I thought that I had a government that would take care of me in a disaster. I thought that our media was always, reporting on what was going on in the country. There are just so many pieces of this. Our government, I knew that our government was controlled by money, but I didn't know that they were owned by the railroad to the point that they would sacrifice human lives. So, what I say to you is keep your eyes open. Uh, don't think that your gut feeling is wrong, and keep fighting. Keep your eyes open to those environmental hazards in your community. I never once in 47 years thought, what if a train full of chemicals derails? You think about your foot getting stuck in the track, or, your car stalling in the middle of the tracks, but you never really think about that. Be ready and be prepared. That's something that we definitely were not. And like Chris said, it's not a matter of if this will happen again, it's when. I actually set a Google alert, which I didn't even know you could do this, but you can type in keywords and it'll send you a report every day of all the articles associated to that word. Put in train derailment and pay attention over the next couple months. Almost every day we get an alert on that. I know we don't have much time, so just real quick, I just wanted to mention this class action that they are trying to push down our throats right now in East Palestine. We have these lead attorneys who, for the class action, have a preliminary settlement with Norfolk Southern already. Part of that settlement was $10,000 for personal injury. They wanted to give you $10,000 and have you sign off on your rights to ever sue them again for anything medically. The other part of it is it's a tiered payout, but basically for people that were within the 1 mile zone, the closest, like Chris and I, they want to give you $70,000 per family, per household. I apologize, per household. Which in my household of 4 would be $17,000 a person if I would get that money. Because what they're also doing is they're taking all those reimbursement costs, the 5 months that I spent in a hotel, eating out 3 times a day that Norfolk Southern was reimbursing us for. They are deducting that from our settlement. So basically, my settlement, I will get $0. I can take the $10,000 and sign off all my medical rights for me and my 4-year-old. But something that I was talking to Steve about that was really interesting was they must not have got enough people to take the personal injury, because the lead attorneys, these are attorneys for us, the plaintiffs, had a town hall Zoom the other night. They've had a toxicologist from the University of Cincinnati that sat there with a straight face and said that, that these chemicals that were dumped in East Palestine, they weren't very bad. There wasn't very many of them, that he sees that there will be no long-term health risks from this, that he does not see one person dying of cancer due to the derailment related chemicals. And how he could even say that with a straight face, is beyond me. And why our attorneys would be having him say that is beyond me. But just another level of the corruption. Now we find out that our attorneys hired their own expert who did testing in East Palestine, but they're now hiding that testing. They're also getting $180 million for being the lead counsel, while I'm going to end up with $0. So when it comes to any type of environmental disaster, from the EPA clear back to the attorneys, if you ever sue, the whole system is corrupt. It's unbelievable. It's like, I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone sometimes. But that's all I'll say. I could talk to you for hours on all the stuff we've done politically, all the evidence that we investigated ourselves. Everyone says they don't think they can do this, but you can do it. Right after the derailment, a woman named Christina contacted me from Pennsylvania, and she said, "Hey, I see all this advocating you're doing for Ohio. We need someone to do that for Pennsylvania." And I said, "Okay, you can do it." And she said, "Oh no, like I'm too shy." She was really shy, meek, mild-mannered, stay-at-home mom. And I was like, "No, you can. I will hold your hand the whole way through this. You can do this, and you will. I can't do this alone. I need more people to help me." And now she's one of our most powerful speakers and such a huge asset to Unity Council. She's actually one of our creek rangers now. Our creek rangers are, there's a few people that go into the creeks regularly. Like they'll go down there, at least they were going down there daily in the beginning. Now, they go down there. When things arrive, they have discovered, a fish kill that was related to a bridge that they tore down. At one point, basically, the EPA was saying the water's fine. We tested the creek water. Well, by that time, all the chemicals had soaked down into the sediment. So when you poke the creek with the stick, there'd be a chemical volcano. Well, then the EPA tried to tell us, oh, well, that's legacy chemicals. That's always been there. I'm a country girl. I fish. I swim in those creeks. We catch our bait in those creeks. I've never seen chemicals like that in those creeks before. So once our creek rangers did some digging and investigation, they're the ones that exposed the chemical sheen. They found someone in Pennsylvania that had been panning for gold in our creeks in October of 2022, like a 2-hour video that they exposed with them just digging, no chemicals. So then the EPA finally comes out and says, oh, we're going to make EPA clean up the creeks under the Clean Water Act. So when they started, it took them over a year to get a plan to clean up the creeks. When they started, it was our creek rangers that went down there and filmed the chemicals just free flowing again. The EPA says, well, this is unacceptable. And we made them stop as soon as we found out. Well, where the hell were you? Why weren't they watching? But this is what our community has done. We have banded together and we have stayed on their asses, and it's funny, not to offend the men in the room, but a lot of the advocates early on from other chemical disasters said at the end, it'll be a bunch of housewives that are still standing, that are fighting, mothers. And I think that reason is because as women, we know how to do it all. Like I'm literally on meetings half the day with my phone tucked in the front of my shirt while I'm doing dishes and while I'm cooking and, taking care of my daughter. And it's also, I know we all have that. It's a mama bear complex. You mess with my child. Like as soon as they said that my child could be dead if she would have stayed in that house, there's no turning back. We all say we would fight to the death for our child. We just don't mean a bear. We'll fight Norfolk Southern. We'll fight the government, and we still are. And that's what I say. Like, if you don't have that unity within your community, if you think that someone's going to come in and save you or that someone's going to come in and take care of things, you're wrong. You have to do that for yourselves. Even the EPA has told us flat out, like, we've never had a community like this before. He said, usually, we come in, people don't like us for a couple of months. We integrate ourselves into the community. Everything's fine. He's like, when are you guys going to stop? The US EPA is asking us, when are we going to stop? And I told him, we're not. We're not going to stop. And it's not just about what happened in East Palestine. It's about every single one of you sitting in that room. It's for every first responder. They do this to first responders every day that respond to these derailments. I get it. It's their job. But if I caught my car on fire every day and they had to come to my house, when is enough enough? Every person that lives within 30 miles of a railroad track. And even when it comes to the lawsuit, this is setting precedent. This lawsuit is going to tell corporate America how much your life will cost them. So they can see if it's worth doing business. Yeah, that was something that was thrown in our faces when Governor DeWine, when Chair Hamidi first said on the floor of Congress that this did not need to happen. There was a third option to let it cool. Governor DeWine said, well, the experts didn't tell us that because your experts were Norfolk Southern. Like, why wouldn't you get a second opinion? If it's a doctor that pierced your lung doing surgery, you don't ask him to fix it. You probably weren't going to trust him. But yeah, even the testing has been put into the hands of Norfolk Southern. And when you talk about the power of these railroads, I mean, they had the balls, sorry, Evie, to threaten, I forgot there was a kid in the room, to threaten the NTSB. Like, what do you think they did to these little government officials in our town? The ones that it took 17 months for one of our local officials to talk about human health concerns. And he's newly elected. They're being openly paid off $25 million park. We don't need a $25 million park. We need our homes tested. That 25 million is the same amount that they're giving us for 20 years of medical health monitoring. For all these people, the same amount you gave for a new park. Like, it's unimaginable. It's seriously the only way I can explain my life anymore is living in the Twilight Zone. For anybody that's old enough to remember the Twilight Zone, that's what my life feels like every day. And Biden finally decided to grace himself with our presence over a year later. A lot of people were excited. He gave them a new sense of hope. We thought that he was going to come there and say that, that we were going to get this federal disaster declaration, and he was going to see the area and realize we weren't okay. But that's not what happened at all. It was more of a photo opportunity. Again, our local government that's very openly being bought off gets to choose who meets with these big time politicians that come in town. They always meet with them at the candle company because you can't smell the chemicals when you're at the candle company. But it was heartbreaking. It broke my heart all over again, I guess. When I started hearing his speech right away, I knew where it was going. And it was just a huge disappointment. Actually, I'm just writing a letter or typing an email to the White House now, because what ended up happening is he was supposed to meet with community members, and he ended up meeting with environmental activists, which I've found through this process are two completely different things. The whole thing was orchestrated by someone who did not live in our community, someone who is currently being investigated by the Attorney General for taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in the name of East Palestine and going on vacations and stuff with it as a nonprofit. So, it's these people that are politically tied, these big nonprofits. They're the ones that have the connections to the government. Oh, and I'm telling you, and I'm not going to say all of them, but I was warned early on is, watch the nonprofits, because everybody wants to come in and uplift their own agenda with a disaster like this. All these big nonprofits that had been fighting these petrochemical. Honey, can you please go out there? Mommy's on a meeting. I'm sorry, guys. But they'll come in and try to lift their own agenda and not truly be there to help. And be quiet. I'm going to sit her here, and she gets a lot of missed attention because I'm always doing this. But as long as, the nonprofits come in and help East Palestine residents, I'm fine to uplift your message to show how bad the chemicals are. I'll fight for a ban on vinyl chloride, but right now we have people that are suffering, people that can't afford to buy water, people that are being researched like lab rats. If you want to come in and buy us some water, yeah, I'll speak on a national platform as to how bad vinyl chloride is. But, you have to be there to help the community as well as to uplift your own agenda, if that makes sense. What really gets me about Biden, it's more of a, I don't know, it's a personal thing for him. His son died from being exposed to these chemical burn pits while he was in the military. The same doctor that found that link between our veterans' illnesses from the chemical burn pits, she's studying us right now. Golomb Research Group, GOLOMB. She's from the University of California, San Diego. So, they're doing research on us now for the very same thing that Biden's son died of. So why not come here, not just as our president, but as a person, when you know that I may be facing that exact same issue with her that he went through with his son, Bo. There's, where's the humanity? poor people. Buy us water, Steve. Let's go down to the basics. Like you think that, just like what you're saying, the things that we need. What about just water? We've not gotten one bottle of water from our government.